Hi, welcome to the Natural Alternative Podcast. I'm here with Helen Harrison this afternoon, and I'm Madonna Guy, your host. Welcome. Helen, you've been a marriage counsellor and empowerment coach for some time. Tell me why you're passionate about this field.
That's a really good question. So really lovely to be here, Madonna. Thank you for asking me. So my business is called Power of Change Counselling and Coaching. And the reason I called it that and the reason I became a counsellor was way back many years ago. I was 19 and my brother was 18 and he suicided. And at the time, I had absolutely no idea how to deal with it. I didn't have the emotional capacity. It was a trauma. So I whacked it away. I put it in a box and I locked it inside of me. So then it was into my early 30s where, parts of my life were not going overly well, suffered terribly with anxiety, fear, always in the fight and flight. And so I started working with a counsellor, and I actually discovered this excitement in me that actually, man, I might be able to move my shit, and then I can actually work with friends and family. However, I quickly realised that working with friends and family, they don't want a bar of it. So, well, what do I do with this? Because as I began to empty and as I began to go inside, I thought, and so I trained as a coach. That's how I initially began. But of course, you would know there's past stuff. So then it went into counselling and holistic counselling and hypnotherapy and psychotherapy and always growing.
What a long journey.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. So going back to what was your original question?
Yes. So what brought you? What gave you the passion for this industry?
Due to my brother's suicide, I wanted to understand me, but I didn't want to be a wounded healer. And so in discovering, I actually discovered a calling to help people become empowered. So I wrote a book for Esteem Ahead, all around self-worth and self-esteem. We do not suicide when we have a strong self-esteem and understand our self-worth, and we're able to be there. It's a love affair with yourself.
Yeah, beautiful. So let's talk about it. It's a touchy topic, suicide. Let's chat about suicide for a little while, because it's something that a lot of people don't want to go because it's hard.
Yes.
It's challenging. And we had a few deaths of close family members when I was I was going to say a kid. I suppose I was about 15 or 16. We had one of my brother's closest friends. He sort of organised a gun. He organised all of his bills. Yep. He went to a secluded place where no one knew about him. And what triggered him into his suicide is that he was actually, believe it or not, in a really great space in his life. He was dating a girl who was of a different religion than he was. And he asked her father if he could marry her. The father said no.
Wow.
So he organised a gun, his bills. He went over to Stradbroke Island. He went up into a beautiful secluded place, and he sat there and he let go of all of the bullets in the gun one by one until there was only one left. And then he sat there, he drank a half a dozen stubbies, and he ended his life. And, and just thinking about it, you would never know what would have happened had he been able to go, it's just no for now, or I'm going to marry her anyway.
Yes.
Or I don't need the father's permission.
That's right.
This is my life. This is her life. We love each other. There's so many alternate answers.
There are. And Madonna, if you got a room full of people, and let's say 500 people, and you ask them to be really honest, how many of them have thought about it? A lot of hands would go up. How many people have actually gone to that step of organising it? The hands would, quite a few, stay up as well. It's a topic that is not talked about enough, and it's a topic that needs to be, because it's normalising it. Not that it's normal to suicide, but when you suicide, you're at a place where you just feel there is no way out. And I think there's so many moving parts. You don't just wake up one day and go, oh, today's the day. it's been a build-up. It's like the parents out there listening, how do you fill your esteem up in your children?
Yeah.
You know, are you constantly filling it? No. I give an example. Say your daughter's at netball and she comes to you and go, oh, did you love that goal that I just did? Or I just did 5 goals. What do you think, Mum? Well, no, you put it back onto her. And you say, well, what do you think? How do you feel? So that she begins to learn to fill her own esteem up and isn't reliant on anything outside of herself.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And when we're believing the external negativity about ourselves, and that's what, you know, in the kinesiology that I do, I often say, well, what are you doing for you?
Yes.
And, you know, women our age, they often get tears in their eyes because they've never actually thought about what they're doing for themselves, how they make themselves happy, what they're doing in their world to fill themselves up and to give them joy.
And she's so true. I've just been reading a book, you might have heard of it, Dr. Chiavelli, Awakening. No, Dr. Chiavelli, Google it anyway. I'd say she's a feminist, but she talks about how us women, we self-sacrifice, we put everybody before ourselves, and to even think that we can put our needs before ourselves is like a foreign thing. So I'm all about, and I rattle on about it all the time, like I've got an Empowered Marriage podcast, which started after my marriage ended because I had a lot to say about marriage. I had stayed in a marriage for too long because it was death do us part. I said I do in the eyes of the law and the eyes of my family, my friends, and the church. God, I was not going to go against that. So I stayed in it too long and I self-sacrificed and I put everybody else before myself. And that belief that you have to stay married. And so it all comes back to empowerment. Actually, no. If you are not happy, you've actually got to dig deeper, and it is okay to have a look inside and look at yourself. I could go on and on about this.
Yeah. I remember when I was about 15, I was going through a tough time, and my mum actually took me to a meditation day, which was weird at the time. I was 15. I didn't think it was very cool. But a couple of things happened in that day that I still remember now. So one of them was we had to write down a list of things that we believed about ourselves that were negative and another list that we thought were positive.
Yeah.
I remember quickly feeling like 50 things that I didn't like about myself and then having a couple of positive things. Yes. And my mum actually looked at the list and she sort of laughed and she said, why would you think that about yourself? And I remember especially there were a couple of things that she sort of had a little dig at me about, which because I felt like I was, you know, getting into the spirit of it and being vulnerable, and it didn't actually work for me, just by the way, in that moment, having mum laughing at me. And mum loved me. It was nothing against, you know, in that moment she was doing what she was doing and I was taking it personally. But it was interesting how quickly it filled me with not feeling good enough because my mum had laughed at me when I was doing something that I thought. But it took me from like, okay, I'm doing the process to, oh, crap, you know, I am worthless. I am useless. I shouldn't have written that down. You know, it doesn't take much when we don't feel good about ourselves to make us drop down energetically again.
Actually, it's so true. I use the example. So imagine this cup, even though it's filled with water. The base of the cup is our self-worth. And we put in things to fill our esteem up. So the idea is not to get it outside of ourselves, but I am awesome. I am enough, and we fill it. However, if we do not have a strong self-worth, it just falls out.
Yeah.
A real indicator if someone has a healthy, strong self-worth is if you give somebody a compliment. If they don't feel good in themselves, they'll give it back. Oh, no. Whereas if they feel good, it's, oh, okay, and it lands and you feel it. And that's exactly the same with birthdays as well. If you have a healthy self-esteem, you'll celebrate your birthdays. For me, for years and years and years, birthdays, I'd go into this mourning grief for a couple of weeks out from my birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, because
And do you know where that came from for you, Helen?
Most definitely. I'm adopted. So I was adopted into a large family. So in my family, there are 10 children and my adopted parents. So my adopted parents, they had 3 biological children, and then they adopted 7 from all countries around the world. So very multicultural.
Wow.
Yeah, Indian and Samoan and Maori and Tongan. And
quite amazing.
Yes. Oh, it is. It is. Look, it sounds great. However, to even adopt one, you have to come from a place of wholeness and to understand that the trauma that that child will have. There's a book. If you're adopted and you're listening to this, get The Primal Wound. You have to have that book because you'll read it and go, oh, holy cow, that's me. So every birthday, I would have this like anniversary grief. I didn't friggin' understand it. All I knew is I dropped into this place that was just filled with so much loss and sadness. To celebrate your friggin' birthday was the most oddest thing. Why would I be celebrating that? So going back to what I said originally about why I became a counsellor, this is so much more than just being a counsellor. I said to you earlier, it's like if you're a singer and you've got a song in you, you actually can't not do it. This is exactly the same of the work that I do. I cannot not do it. It is a calling. However, I said to you earlier in December, I had another sibling who suicided. I don't want to go into the details, but to say it's a tragedy of another whole level. My sister, she was 10 years younger than me. However, again, she was adopted just like my brother. And if you do not have that sense of worth, she was also Samoan. And which world do I belong in? Am I in the Caucasian world or am I in the Samoan world?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people who adopt, they don't think about the ramifications of adopting from another. I had a client recently who was telling me he's like a real life story, like Lion, the movie with Dev, the movie Lion?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So his was a real life story like that. He was adopted from, I can't remember, somewhere in below Mexico.
Yes.
So geography.
Yeah.
But he was adopted when he was a baby. And turns out he has found out 25 years later that he was stolen from a local hospital when he was like 1 year old or something.
And so the body remembers that, as you know, the body remembers it.
Absolutely. So his parents here in Australia, they think they're doing this fantastic thing, adopting, which they are. They're adopting a little baby who needs a life, but nonetheless, this little baby was torn away from his family by the authorities locally. 25 years later, because of Facebook, he starts putting his story on the local page that has his nationality on there, and people start contacting him. And it totally blew him away.
Yeah.
And when I saw him recently, he'd only just saw the movie Lion. And I said, oh, man, did you cry your heart out? And he absolutely did. But his white family here in Australia are really struggling with the ramifications of having adopted someone 30 years ago who was stolen. So the terror and the trauma and the PTSD is throughout that whole family now.
Enormous.
And he's found out that he was one of 12 kids.
Yeah.
So he's now connecting with all of them, with all of that emotional.
It's so much processing and so much to work through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think people believe they're so strong they don't need to. A lot of people just, whack it under the mat. Oh, it'll, if I don't think about it, it won't hurt me.
Well, what I've discovered, because in December, when I got the news, I just moved house. I'd had a huge year of work. So my tank was a little bit empty. So when I got that news, and you can relate to this, it's like I got smashed into a million pieces. And that sense, that self that I had created, it was like it was just smashed wide friggin' open. Who am I in all of this?
Yeah.
It's like, and through this, it's like, and I can feel my sister. I can feel her with me. It's like I've come back, but I've come back so much more authentically, not who I think I should be in the world. I want to be more authentic, and I think it's so much of me. Like I look back, I can't even look at them. My videos, I stopped all my social media because all my videos were so sort of man-made and so sort of just from the head up, so ego related. Whereas now, from what's happened, like I don't give a shit what anybody thinks about me now.
Yeah.
It is solely, it's like been a really big shift and dropping out of the head and into the heart and into the gut. And that's, it's huge. So if we come back to suicide, it's for all of us. And it's not for you to have a family member or someone close to you suicide, but for all of us to be able to get that inner knowing. There's a pool of love in me that I haven't ever deeply touched into like I have now. Like it's profound.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And do you have a couple of key tips that you have for people to get them to fill their own cup up, to get them to empower themselves?
The number one thing, because I'm a type A, I'm go, you know, listen, full on. Stillness, stopping, I've always meditated. I've known it's a practice, but I've tended to do it in the middle of the day. Or the first thing, it doesn't matter what time I wake up. If it's 4:30, I will get up. This room here is my queendom. And I've got all my books and all my beautifulness. And it's just solely my room. I've got my meditation chair and my crystals and my candles. And I've made it a queendom. So I will come in here first thing in the morning because I've always found it really hard to meditate. This monkey mind and, you know. And they say it's practice, and I agree. But since my sister has passed, there is something where I love just going in. And I land in and I'm there and I feel it, and I feel that soul connection like I've never, ever felt before. And yeah, the thoughts, they're doing their thing, but I'm not attaching to it. So the first thing is somewhere, and ideally first thing, I always used to go to the gym. Like I used to go to F45. I used to run. I used to do workouts. I don't do any of that now. I do my meditation. If I need to journal, if I've got something hanging around that I can't shift, I'll journal it and I'll be with it. And then I stretch. Like behind me is that wall. I put my legs up. That is the most best exercise, to have my legs up against the wall. And just because I've always been in trauma and always been in the fight and flight, and it's been less over the years, I now inhabit my body. So I've always had a very tight body because I've had the anxiety.
Yeah.
Now every day
your body's been in protection every day of your life.
So now I stretch, and I don't go to my yoga classes out there because when I'm out there, I'm always out there. I actually close my eyes, I have my music, and I stretch with what my body is telling me to do. It's so freaking different. It's so different. So if you were to ask, stillness, with stillness comes meditation and stretching. Your way. You actually know what to do.
Yeah.
But we don't trust ourselves enough.
So what do you say to those people who say, I can't stop, my body won't let me, my brain won't let me? Because that's often the first thing people say.
Yes. So I would ask them, where in their world is their happy place? Is it down at the water? Is it at in nature? Is it at grandma's house and the favourite chair? You will have a place. Like with men often don't even want to go there, but I get them to start describing their happy place to me. Because a lot of them, it's out on their own, on their fishing boat. They're not catching anything, but they're fishing. Because they're at one. They're at peace. It's grace, God, universe. It doesn't really matter what you call it. So if you're unable to capture it in a room yet, you go somewhere in nature and capture it there first to begin to feel it. It's crucial. Do you agree?
Yeah, and some people might not actually be able to see the nature. Like if you're a runner, for example, you might simply put your headphones in, get on the road, run for an hour, hour and a half, and really you're thinking, you're in your head all the time because of the music or the podcast or the radio or whatever you're listening to, as opposed to actually looking at nature, at the beauty, at the sunrise, at the sunset, at the clouds, at the sky. So we don't even take in those things even when we're taking time out.
Present. That's a huge thing that I've noticed since December is noticing if I'm present. Because when I'm not present, I will drop into the past and I'll go into the stories, and then the grief comes in like friggin' waves. What I did, a huge gift I gave myself, is I took myself away for a week. Took myself away into this little cabin with this little stream, and it was beautiful. And they provided meals, so I just set my alarm for 3 times a day, and I went and had my meals. But I came back, on a Monday morning, I'd have a bath for an hour and a half. I mean, who friggin' does that? But what I gave myself is, there were no lists, there was no to-doing. I just had to begin practicing to be present, because I didn't want to do what I had done last time with my brother's suicide, because I didn't know how to freaking deal with it. Whereas this time I did. And I knew that I needed stillness, and I had to be with whatever came up. And it's been transformational, because I'm not running from it. I knew that I needed to go away, because I started drinking again. I started doing coffee. I started going on social media freaking an hour, and I'm not going to get that part of my life back. I was doing these vices because I didn't want to drop into the grief.
Yeah.
So by taking myself away, it was a reason.